I feel absolutely rotten and gutted that I am the cause as to why you woke up early in the morning, left the warmth of your significant others to come to this most amazing, wonderful heritage building that is 130 years old. Fatima and I were standing outside enjoying the blue skies and African sunshine and reminiscing about what this place used to look like not many years ago. I have a confession to make. I'm also responsible for bringing you here, because in my youth, when I still had hair, we started a small company called Tsibo Outsourcing with 3 people. The idea was to run it for 5 years, never to work again. We failed miserably, but when we did sell it 6 years later, we probably still hold the record of the highest PE multiple after tax paid, and 19.7 times, 15 times EBIT multiple. And we had 67,000 people, not after 5 years we sold, but after 6 years. We were the only company in the history of this country that had not 1 but 5 public-private partnerships. The very first is not too far from here, called Inkosi Albelutuli Central Hospital, a tertiary and quaternary referral hospital. But one of my greatest joy and pride was walking this area when it smelled of fish, dead everywhere, where things happened here that you don't want to tell your children. And our first project was to clear the mess and build what is now known as Ushaka Marine Project. We built it and brought the water from the ocean and managed it. And there was a day when patrons like yourselves were sitting in a restaurant and you could see these big creatures of nature, and 2 sharks died because we didn't get the alkalinity and acidity right. I was the first respondent on that day. So this place holds very warm memories for me. So Fatima, thank you so much for turning it into this beauty, this magnificence, this grace, this elegance of style. The deputy mayor has already been welcomed by my boss, Ntate Themba Maseko. We go a long way with her. We come a long way. If I wasn't married, I would have probably married her. Her family wanted too many cattle from an African who didn't have. So I said, I'll come to her wedding. Her worship councillor, Fozia Pierre, together with some of the colleagues that are here, not too long ago, we gave awards to this province, recognizing the very presence of excellence in our midst. So siyabonga kakhulu ke bantu abadala ukuthi nisixhase nje kuthiwa amathanga ahlanzela abanganamabhodo. But we are here for something much more serious and much more immediate and ominous. To talk about the future of not only South Africa, but of our grandchildren. And the reason why we have invited many of you is because every single solitary one of you are leaders whose primary responsibility is to keep South Africa running. Last month, I and members of my 12-member strong board 80-member strong council of CEOs called Business Leadership South Africa. There is no other organization that looks like BLSA because it's the only organization of CEOs and their chairmen, not the politically correct one of chairpersons. We came together and reflected on the status of our country, and we were shocked as to how bad we've become so quickly when so many of us dare to hope that joy and peace will prevail. We launched this in Alexander. 80 CEOs with suits like myself left the real prime estate, the richest square mile in this country, and walked across the bridge to Alexander to be with the poor of the most poorest, who are their employees, who come to work every morning and we have no clue what they go through. But also to see, touch, smell, and witness the squalor, the self-perpetuating vicious cycle of abject poverty, where they live. We're moved beyond words. I grew up in a township, but even I was shocked. It's not just the symbolism that took us to Alexander, it's a message we wanted to send, that this BLSA that will be 60 years old next year is a new BLSA that will be just as equally obsessed with the well-being of our own kith and kind, blood of Alexander. Because until and unless we do that, we cannot even begin to talk about social cohesion. So I'm now traveling the country in order to remake that commitment in every corner of South Africa. A commitment where we said business believes and pledged our commitment to delivering a better society for our children and grandchildren. Because this country belongs not only to the politicians, but to every single solitary one of the people in this room, your forebears, but also your grandchildren. So I want to remake that pledge today in your presence, in your midst, with all the seriousness that it deserves. So if you take just one message, and one message only, today let it be this. Business believes in South Africa, period. We believe in South Africa's future. We share the values that are set in our constitution, which is the only thing that stands between us and anarchy. And we say humbly that we want to play our part in ensuring that transformation that so many in South Africa need so desperately happens in our lifetime. Not only in words, but in deeds. And to that effect, we'll ask for every single solitary one of you that have power, that have influence, to help us to achieve that. Because if we don't do that, we might as well all of us pack up and find a place somewhere else. This is truly God's own country. By our actions and the choices we make today, we will ensure whether we go the high road of prosperity or the low road of darkness and chaos. We are patriots who see our role as creating jobs, growing the economy, and investing not only in our employees but also in our communities. So let there be no doubt, business believes in South Africa. But I stand before you today as a representative of business in South Africa to say, not in our name. Something is wrong in South Africa today. Badly wrong. Whilst much has changed for the better since the dark days of apartheid, too much has stayed the same. Too many South Africans are still living low quality lives and denied the most basic of opportunities. Too many South Africans are without a job. How can they have self-esteem, decency and pride? Too often the dream of an equal South Africa has been betrayed by those that we trusted the most. Our society continues to be ravaged by unemployment, by poverty, by nepotism, and by corruption. So in the question and answers, as we engage, interact, and interface honestly, openly, and transparently from the heart, I'll come back to this topic because we erroneously use the words corruption and state capture interchangeably. Business confidence and consumer confidence in South Africa is at a 30-year low because of the behavior of government and its poor leadership. And while business must of course play its part, it's not enough. The government must start to govern in the interest of the many and not just the privileged few. In too many sectors of the economy and public life, policies have either been poorly conceived or poorly executed. We are not educating and empowering our people to join the workforce. We are not creating a policy environment that supports job creation and inclusive economic growth. And so we call on all political parties and civil society to work with business to make inclusive economic growth the number one priority. Because under these circumstances, business is the answer, not the enemy. Because there's no way anywhere else in the world that you can claim to be pro-growth and yet anti-business. It's an anachronism that should not even cross our mind. We are not doing the things that we ought to be doing, and we are doing those things that we ought not to be doing, and so we call on all of civil society to go back to the days of being activists, active citizenry, because if we don't do that, our children will disown us. Because business believes when the economy is strong, the rest of South Africa is strong. When business does well, the rest of society does well. We've also been discovering, to our horror, the impact of widespread corruption and state capture. These are the cancers eating away at this society. We know business has made mistakes and too often fallen short. We're the first to admit that's why we're cleaning our own house first and foremost. We are well aware that business itself is not blameless. At times we have been too disengaged from the public discussion on these cancers because we erroneously thought that the business of business is business. We have followed ourselves and allowed ourselves to be portrayed as somehow separate from society and self-interested. This picture is a caricature, a distortion of reality, because I live in these societies. Most of you emanate from this poverty. A lot of you have people working for you and with you who are from these societies. So what is society if it is not the people who walk into our offices, through our factory gates, who pack our shelves and go down our mines every single solitary day? We know business does not stand apart from society. It should be society at work, and as such, a critical player in our national life. Had we done that, Marikana could not have happened 5 years ago. 44 people killed in 2 days, 34 within 20 minutes. At the same time, we must acknowledge that every caricature is often founded in fact. Yes, there are businessmen and women who are paid too much. Yes, business leadership in this country is still mainly white and male. Yes, there are businesses who have engaged in corrupt practices. Yes, large corporations are seen as not supporting small and black-owned businesses. These are the challenges that we as the CEOs must and are prepared to confront here and now in this context, in this country. But as we acknowledge our own failings, we must also highlight the greater problem. Put simply, we cannot create the conditions for inclusive economic growth in the face of corruption and state capture, because government has a disproportionate influence in all our lives. Too often government contracts and jobs go to the connected rather than the deserving. This government hates competence, not only because it shows them up, but with competent people it's very difficult to capture the state. So I stand before you today to say business believes in South Africa. This situation is a moral stain on our country. If current trends continue, the country faces a bleak future and will be forced to live with the legacy of leaving our children a worse country than we inherited. And it behooves us to leave this country in a state that on a composite basis is substantially better than the one we inherited. There is no greater challenge for us all, both as individuals, as business leaders, individually and severally, than confronting corruption and state capture and changing it. Not expecting the politicians to change it. The duration of oppression is never determined by the oppressor, but always determined by the oppressed. It's only when civil society says this much and no more that things will start moving. It is within our grasp to ensure that these trends do not continue, let alone continue in our name, that we grasp the situation and take the decisions necessary to shape a better life for all. A better life for all does not mean a better life only for the 400 MPs, but for those less fortunate than ourselves. Servant leadership can't mean leaders who have many servants, but leaders that serve, because the best amongst us lead with the heart of a servant. So I stand before you today to emphasize that business believes in South Africa. South Africa's future and our future as businesses are intertwined and inseparable. For too long we have remained on the sidelines. I want to say loudly and clearly that business is ready to play a full part in the transformation that South Africa so desperately needs, and to make sure this country works, not just for a privileged few, but for everyone. For the 17 million people who are on social grants, the 9.3 million people that are unemployed, the 8 million children that have never seen their fathers. So we meet today in this hotel on Mahatma Gandhi Road, a great name that evokes strong memories and emotions of activism. Of course, Durban is where Gandhi arrived when he first came to South Africa to work as a lawyer. Just down the road in the courthouse, where he would often visit to defend his clients, and where he encountered the burning injustice that would spur him to become the great leader he was. He famously said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world, In that spirit, that is what we, the business community, are now doing. We must and will be the change we wish to see in South Africa. That job can't be outsourced. The legacy of the ugly and deceitful white monopoly capital, that campaign which sought to blame business for many of the problems that beset the country, has forced us to speak out. In this environment, business cannot stand idly by and will work with others, be they representatives of labor, faith-based organizations, political parties of any kind, anyone who shares our values and wants to set this country on the right course, because business has chosen to be on the side of good. And so, as we did in Alexander, we commit again today to a contract with South Africa. We'll do all we can to do the following 6 things. To create jobs by growing the economy. South African businesses have created 6 times as many jobs as government since 1994. Our aim is to create even more. So I'm talking about 13.5 million jobs of the 15 million people that are gainfully employed. Secondly, we want to encourage and empower senior black leaders. So the definition of black in our employment equity legislation says all those that were excluded on the basis that they are not white. And this was said by mostly white business people, that we want to encourage and empower senior black leaders, because we have done well in all levels, janitorial, middle management. Where we have spectacularly failed is at the C-suite, the CEOs, that still don't look broadly reflective of the demographics of this country. Ultimately, the best way to close the opportunity gap is to invest in more businesses owned, run, managed, and employing more black South Africans and women in particular. We pledge to grow a new generation of black leaderships, but also black entrepreneurs. Thirdly, we want to invest in South Africans. South Africa can only meet the challenges of the future with a highly skilled workforce. We will train South African managers and workers for the challenges ahead. We'll train them for the jobs of today, but also for the jobs of the 21st century, of the 4th industrial revolution, of artificial intelligence, of driverless cars, of robotics, where we know that more than 40% of the jobs that will be required then don't even exist, therefore we don't know, but to build in the resilience that they can indeed come to the fore. We'll invest in our communities. Business owes it to South Africans to do more to ensure the communities where it operates thrive and prosper. Not only because we want to have a positive predisposition by these communities, but because we want to bring about this notion of shared value. Not only to be obsessed with return on investments for our shareholders, but also for business to say we'll pay our employees decent wages so that they can afford the goods and services that we produce, because if they don't, then there's a problem. To invest in our communities, because that's business's job, not anybody else's. It can't just be the work of government. We will support small businesses. They should be the lifeblood of our economy, but too often they struggle. It is our duty to help them succeed by financing new businesses, by training, by mentoring, by coaching, by counseling and holding by the hand the entrepreneurs and set them up for success, not leave it only to them to fail. So we want to share the little that we have learned in running our own businesses and big multinational corporations so that our entrepreneurs don't have to go through the same pain but shorten their own life curves. Lastly, we want to condemn and root out corruption. Corruption and state capture are the cancers that are eating away at our society. They must be rooted out, crushed, and punished where we find them, whether it's in the public or private sector. This is our contract with South Africa. So judge us by it. Hold us accountable. We will be able to fulfill this contract better if the government also steps up. Business believes government must also commit to creating the conditions necessary for business to succeed so the economy can grow. Too many bad decisions have gotten in the way of that. Addressing the gap in understanding will be a key mission for BLSA going forward, because it is our job to embolden every single solitary South African to say, surely our people can be better led by a leadership that fully commits on the basis of full understanding. So our contract is not a program, but a commitment. It's a pledge. BLSA is a membership organization. What we will do is that we are going to work through this contract in telling South Africans that we'll do more, and we are committed to do more, because together we can achieve more. Because the tone is always set at the top. Bob Gareth wrote a wonderful book that also says the fish rots from the top. Through the contract, we are making clear that we are absolutely understanding our responsibility to lead. It is our critical mission. We know you'll judge us by our deeds and not our words, and we welcome that. And it will be the responsibility of all our members to convert these powerful words into deeds, to return to their offices, recommitted to the task, determined to be making real, tangible progress in all these different areas. And society will be entitled to monitor the progress businesses are making towards meeting these pledges. Last month, we also launched our anti-corruption oath. We called it the Integrity Pledge. As we call on government to end corruption, we want to be clear that we are, as business, also cleaning up our own house, that we will also do everything in our power to crush it where we see it. Our integrity pledge states only 4 things. Even I can remember them. It says we'll have zero tolerance for corruption in our midst, because charity, like clarity, begins at home. Will not act anti-competitively. Price fixing, collusion, market allocation. No. We will protect whistleblowers. And we will cooperate with authorities proactively, because it's manifestly in our interest to have good governance, clean governance. We also need to see our commitment matched, of course, by government and by labor. That's what a social compact is made of. All of us coming together and say, we have a great political vision. We have a somehow confused economic vision. But we need a social contract that says, moving forward, how can we do everything in our power to ensure that we improve the quality of lives of the majority of our people? From government, we expect a commitment to crushing corruption and developing an environment that allows business to invest, to grow the economy and create jobs, without which we will not have a future worth sharing. Because very soon we'll be talking about redistributing poverty, not wealth. Labor too must step up and show that it is willing to make the sorts of commitments necessary to create a successful climate for growth and job creation. So when Gandhi first arrived in Durban, he was meant to only stay 1 year. But on the day he was meant to leave for India, the people pleaded for him to stay and fight for the cause to which he dedicated his life. Gandhi did not turn his back on them, and he ended up staying in South Africa for 20 glorious, magnificent years. Today we are fighting for a new cause in South Africa and will not turn our backs. Like Gandhi, we have today signed our contract with South Africa and backed it up with an integrity pledge. It's a statement of businesses' belief in the future of this country and our commitment to making it happen. I recognize that not everybody here today is a BLS member, but you will be soon. But I know that all business leaders want to contribute to a growing, prosperous South Africa that is creating jobs and transforming concurrently, simultaneously, at the same time. So I ask you all, whether you are BLSA members or not, to sign this contract and pledge. I ask you to take it back to your workplace and share it with your staff and stakeholders. I ask you to help our campaign generate momentum and help us deliver the change that we need. We face a serious situation in South Africa. We do not presume to know all the answers. That's why we'll humble ourselves and work with you hand in glove. For this reason, that's why I'm here this morning. For this reason, that's why I apologize just a little bit for waking you up so early in the morning. Business has started on a journey to a better South Africa. But it's not a journey that we can make alone. I hope every single solitary one of you will join us. It may be a struggle and will be many setbacks, but we are guided by those leaders who have come before us, who fought to change South Africa for the better. Indlela ibuzwa kuba phambili, umkhonto wegwala uphelele etsheni. Masihambeni siyolo. Thank you very much.